All right, it's Thursday. Um, so we'll get started today. We'll work on the learning activity, get you set up for the assignment, and then we have Clara coming in as our guest speaker from Securian at 11. So we'll see how far we get before then here. Um, One quick note. Election was Tuesday. For some people, the results are very discouraging. So I just want to offer my support. If you need to talk to someone, I think Megan sent out a nice email, Megan Perry Spears, about some resources, but I didn't see it because it just goes to students, but she probably, I imagine Megan sent something out. But if you need an emotional support faculty member, feel free to stop by my office. I have chocolate and ice cream in my office. So if you need someone to vent with or share, just talk, I'll be around. Um, Another thing to watch is I'll be sending out another set of job listings today or tomorrow for things. There's a number of good jobs for people graduating in December. So if you're graduating in December, there are a number of good options. Even in Duluth here, we've got two new ones at Elite here, and I think a new one at CIS. Uh, Both targeted to December grads. And there's a bunch of internships. A number of companies are posting their internships too. I'll just warn you, a lot of students say, oh, I'm just going to wait till the end of the semester and apply to internships over break. And I'll just warn you, there's usually not very many internships listed over break, over winter break. They tend to run until the middle of November here. And then once we get to Thanksgiving, most companies don't list them because they don't get enough responses everyone between Thanksgiving and after New Year's. So between like in another week or so, I'll probably send out one more email in November, but then from then on until basically, first week in January, like January 7th or 8th, we won't see that many more internships. So it's a busy time of year, but it is worthwhile to take an hour or so and apply to these internships when they come available. I'm feeling, and I've talked to some people, that companies are generally listing these for like 2 or 3 weeks before they are filled here. Some of them have deadlines listed, but a lot of them don't. But again, they'll list them for a couple weeks and I don't get to them right away. I don't see them right away. So it's usually a week before I see them, which means you only have about a week to apply to these internships. So just keep that in mind for that. Um, Okay, so I'll try to send the newest list out there. And again, same with the entry level jobs. The ones in Duluth were just listed. And again, they will probably get full, they'll probably be filled within the next 3 weeks here. So uh, okay, let's look at unit 10 here. We have pretty complicated setup, and we're talking about decorators and composite patterns. We're going to try out the decorator today and do that in a couple ways. And also talk a little bit about asynchronous tasks here. So we're going to go down to the learning activity here and do the learning activity. So again, there's just an assignment here. Click on that and set that up, download that here. It's pretty well what you finished off last week with. So we have the single responsibility principles folder where we have our main program. We have a console login. We have a number of data providers here, and we can kind of swap between which data provider we use. We have one trade parser, and that uses a mapper and a validator here. And then we have in the ADO.NET thing, we have our database. We write to the database for this. We have, move this out of the way. Okay. We have all of our interfaces in this contracts folder. So all the interfaces are there. And then we have all of our tests in our test area. I think by default, all the tests should be running. You should all the tests should pass. Because again, that's where we were last time, is we were trying to get all the tests passed. So again, we're going to be working with this same, basically where we left off last time here. I think it's useful. I mean, this is the most interesting project, but again, because we're able to kind of build on it, I think you can get to know it pretty well and see how complicated it is. Oh, I'm getting an error with my RESTful one. Oh yeah, I think if I just run this, I don't think I've run this today, so I think it's just timing out on the Azure database. So we'll run that. So again, the Azure database, because we're at the free level, the first time we run it, it takes a little while to get booted up there. So I think that's why that test is failing. I'll run it here and we'll try again. Okay, so I think this is a good project because again, we can kind of add more and more complexity and see kind of how a project like this grows to be more complex and how we can hopefully set it up so we can add things to it uh, in a nice organized fashion. So the first thing we're going to do is do this trade adjustment parser or trade adjustment. So the idea here is that, let me just see if this is running. We're still connected to the database here. So the idea is that sometimes different, yeah, here's my timeout, sorry. So I'm just going to stop and then we'll run that again in just a sec. So we're dealing with currencies from different countries, and let's just assume that Great Britain, so they were part of the Union, European Union, and they pulled away, and they use a Great Britain pound. Even when they weren't in the EU, they used the Great Britain pound there. But let's say they decide to go back in the European Union, and so in that case, any of the trades listed that list the GBP, the Great Britain pound, we want those to convert to euros there. So we just want to add a decorator to our trade provider here that converts every instance of GBP to euro, EUR, in the data red. Again, you could do this in a number of places, the parser, the database writer, whatever. But I actually think my philosophy generally is that if you're going to have to change the data, change it as early as you can in the stream. So we're going to change it right when we read it from the data file here. So we're going to read in the data file and do it. So we're going to try to do that. So let's make sure we're using this URL trade provider, and we're going to modify that here. I'm going to just run this one more time. Still. Okay, while I'm letting that run, let's talk about, oops, yeah, there. Okay, now it's working better. Okay. So I'm going to look in the programs.cs file to see what's happening there. So we have a number of different trade providers. We could use a stream trade provider or a file trade provider and open up a stream, and we declare a stream. We could read it in from a local file one way. We have a RESTful trade provider here for this, and we also have a URL trade provider for this. So let me see. So down here we're declaring our different trade providers here. And I'm going to actually, I, I'm going to change this back to what I think you see. I've done this already. Okay. So if you look in your program.cs folder, down here where you set up the trade processor, we provide the trade processor with three things: the provider, the parser, and the storage class. And so we want to be providing that with the URL trade provider, and we should be declaring that up here. So make sure that one is uncommented here, and then we're using it here. We're using the URL trade provider. And that should be writing code to a reading code from a URL for this. And then it should run again. We should run, and now that we've got things booted up, it should run relatively fast, hopefully. I don't know if we're all hitting this. Yeah, it should say 4 trades processed for that. So that should be good. Now I want you to start going through here. I want you to create a new class to adjust this. Inside that new class, we want to instantiate a URL trade provider object. And we want to then change the get trade data so that we call get trade data in this. So again, right now, our main program calls this URL trade data provider. We're going to have this adjusted trade data provider in between. And that's going to call this URL trade data provider. And the console main program will use this instead. And again, the main goal is just go through all the strings. Anywhere there's a GBP string, we want to change it to a Euro string, an EUR string. So you're going to tweak it that way. See if you can walk through the code and do this stuff for that. So just a quick reminder, you might want to look back to Tuesday. We talked about the decorator object and looked at a really simple version from the textbook here. This is our decorator component. It implements the same interface as our normal component. In the constructor, we pass in the decorated component that we want to do, and we save that locally. And then in our method here was called something, we call the decorated component, call it something, and then we do something else around that. So again, this is basically the framework you want to follow here. Your adjusted trade data provider class. It should implement an interface, the same interface as the decorated class. We should pass in the decorated, a component here that you would work with. You want to save that locally. And then when you're doing something, and in this case, you'll be doing the trade processing there, you want to do that. So I'll just leave this code kind of up here as an overview of what you should be kind of thinking of here. So one correction I just want to make is that in the instructions I said to instantiate the base or the URL trade provider there, we really want to pass it in as a parameter to the constructor there. So again, so in your class there, when I'm doing when I'm decorating a provider or a class, I like to have the original class here. So here's my original class here, and I see it implements this interface. So I'm going to make sure I implement that same interface here, right? And again, I want to implement that interface. So I'm just going to say implement interface. It'll add the get trade data method that's required for this. And then the other thing I'm going to need is a constructor here, here. So I need to add the constructor, and again, code, smart stuff will set this up. But I want to pass in one object here. I'm going to pass in an object that does this same interface and is my original provider here. And I want to save that here. So I just want to make sure I save in my, yeah. So now I can call my constructor, pass in my original provider. And again, you can call whatever you want. Like the textbook calls it the base provider, I think. Here, call it the decorated component. But whatever you want. I like to call it the original uh, provider. And then in your get trade data, you want to call that base provider here, and you'll get a bunch of strings back from it, and then you want to do stuff. So you want to call the original get trade data, and then you want to change Great British Pound to Euro. EUR, EU. In all the text lines. So see how that goes. So here's where I'm at this, if you're getting stuck. So again, I passed through my original provider. I'm implementing get trades. So I'm calling in my original provider, I'm calling that get trades, and that returns, if I go look, it returns this trade data, which is IEnumerable strings. Basically, it's a list of strings here. So I declare an IEnumerable strings called lines, and I store the lines I get back from this get trade data provider, my original one. Now I want to go through that. That's just a list of lines. I want to go through that and replace all the Great British Pounds with EUs here. So I want to do that. You might want to think back to like, Java 2 sort of stuff, Java 1. I'm just going to do for each. Again, I could do it, well, with an iterator like this, you can use for each better than you can just use a generic for loop and here. So for each line in lines, and I'm going to somehow I have to replace that. So I have to say like line dot replace or something like that. And yeah, I want to replace what Great British Pound with EU. Now, I don't know. I better look what order this is. Is this the original which one of these is how does replace work? So now it should warn you that this creates a new string here. It doesn't actually change the original string in the array. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new array of results, and I'm going to add this replace string to that. Maybe I should do that in 2 lines to make it clearer. Now, this is certainly not the optimal way of doing this, but it is one way of doing this. So something like that. So once you get this new adjusted trade provider set up, let's look at how we would use it here. So and I don't have that in the instructions. I don't actually require that you do this, but I just want to show you how you might use this. Um, in our main code here, back in our main program, we create a URL trade provider here, and then we're going to also create one of these adjusted trade providers. So we're going to say create a new one of those. And it's going to be one of these iTrade data provider types. It's going to implement this interface, so I can say it's and I'm going to give this variable some name. Just And then just like here, I have to pass in my original trade provider. So I'm going to pass in my URL trade provider. So I'm going to create my URL trade provider, pass that in to my adjusted trade data provider. Oh, something's not, I need to make sure this is all public. Yeah, so this is a public class. My constructor, I think, needs to be public also. That should make it happier. Yeah. Okay, and then now that I have my adjusted trade provider here, I'm going to use that in my trade processor. So again, I'm creating a new object in my main program with this adjusted trade provider. I'm sending it the URL trade provider. And then when I create my trade processor, rather than sending it the URL trade provider, I'm sending it the new one. So again, that kind of rewires this. So our main program will now use this adjusted trade provider, and the adjusted trade provider will use the URL trade provider. So this kind of provides that rewiring. I create my adjusted one, give it the URL trade provider, and then when I create my trade processor, I use my adjusted one instead of the URL one here. And then I should be able to run this, and it should still work. Hopefully I didn't break anything. Now, really, you should have some unit tests. We should create some unit tests to test this out, but we are not going to do that. It doesn't look good. I'm getting a null error here. Why am I getting a null error here? Oh, I'm not saving this correctly. I need to do this dot provide get when I'm passing in the original provider, I wasn't saving it to my local variable. So let's see if that will work better. So then it should run fine using these. And again, you can also put in some printout statements to see that it's working here. You can, again, I asked AI to do this. Now, how would you ask AI to do it? So this is how I did it. I just said, can you create a decorator method that works with the following class, and provided that whole class here. And the new decorator class should implement the same interface and provide the interface. And it provided me kind of a generic class here with some explanation. But then I said, okay, now modify or change the new class so it converts each instance of Great British Pound to Euro in each of the text lines red. And so then, let's see if I can get this scrolled over. I did a new class implemented, and again, I didn't use this code directly, but it's a good overview. You know, here's the new class. I named mine differently. I don't like this version, this long name. Implemented the interface. Here's it's saving the private, the local variable, the local. It's passing in the logger. I don't think I need to do that, so I didn't do that, but I could here. And here's my get trade data here. It's putting some of the stuff in error checking, which isn't bad. It's doing some logging, which is fine. I could do some logging here too if I had access to a logger, which I actually don't. Here's how it replaces it. So I used a big loop here. Again, that's probably not the most efficient way. It did that with this one line here. And I don't know what that one line does. So then I ask it. So it describes it. It didn't describe that. So then I asked it, describe what this line does. And this uses what is called language link here, which is kind of a string manipulation and data manipulation system built into .NET, similar to what Python actually has, and talks about how this will go through each line and replace this with this and set this up for it. So we could have just done this instead of our loop here. So this whole loop could have also been done with this here. But again, I didn't call mine trade data. I called mine lines. So it would have to be like that. But that would be another way of doing it. A much shorter way of doing it. Okay. Back to the assignment. I forgot we had a guest speaker, so I have three parts here. I'm going to make the third part, part three, a bonus thing. So if you wanted to get some extra credit points, you can do that. But I don't think we're going to have time to do it in this. The part two, I think we can get a good start on is we're basically going to do the same thing, but with an asynchronous reader here. So we're going to add a decorator, just like we did here, repeat that whole process, call get trade data, but do this asynchronous. So make an asynchronous provider here. So see if you can go through and do that. Basically, we're repeating this stuff. So now rather than changing the strings, we're going to try. So when we call this URL, we do it asynchronously. I'm going to add a hint into here too. Hint. So online students, can you watch for Clara showing up as a guest speaker? And if so, just say something to us so we'll know when she arrives. Quick note on our guest speakers. We're again going to move physically over to this side of the room and talk to the speakers. Just a reminder that these are professionals. I've been kind of disappointed in our lack of attention to the guest speakers. So they are giving up time in their busy day to talk to us. So I expect you to, act professionally. Don't be working on your assignment while the guest speaker is talking to us here. I'd also like those of you online, if you can, go put your cameras on so the guest speaker can see that you're engaged with this also here. And again, think of some questions. I think we've done enough of these that you know kind of the common questions I'll ask. It'd be nice if I don't have to ask all the questions this time. So we'll watch for Clara. So one more thing on the second part of this asynchronous thing, I point you to this RESTful trade provider is this sample code that we have. Also, it's in your project. What that does is it has an async get trades asynchronous call, and most of the code's in there. And then when it calls get trade data, it uses this strange command to run this a task and call get trade async, calls asynchronous version of this. Then it waits for that, and then it takes the results of this task and returns that. So you'll need some code like that. So again, in your code, here's my final version of this. Again, we're implementing the interface. We're passing in the original trade provider. We're saving that. Now, our get trade data here is doing like we did the other thing. It is calling this asynchronous trade data thing, and this asynchronous trade data returns a task, and it is calling the original one. I think you can actually combine this all in one, but here we've broken it up into two steps here. Basically, what you want to do is you want to create a task and run the original get trade data from the original provider asynchronously. And that'll return not just an IEnumerable of strings, but that'll be put inside a task object here. And then once you have that task object, you've got to wait on that. And then once you're done waiting, you'll convert that to go task.result to convert that to just IEnumerable of string and return that. So see how far you can get. Again, we didn't get as far as I wanted to today. So see, this is just a learning activity. So if you don't get it all working, submit what you can for this. Now you might be asking, well, what do all these things do, Tom? Well, if only you had an assignment that would let you figure that all out here. So for the assignment, you have a couple choices in the assignment. You can look at how this asynchronous, how we might handle this asynchronous stuff, or something called an async enumerable is another way. So there's two ways of kind of handling this data. Hey Clara, and then you can learn more about this async. And then if you're tired and don't want to learn any more from async, you can learn about some more about our unit tests. Okay, let me stop sharing here. And